as Sean and Carol both mentioned, it's really, taking the work of what Carol's done with her books and also through the NAIFA community and also Asset Maps stencils to highlight how they can work so nicely together today. But I am going to take a few minutes just to level set on Asset Map and make sure that everyone is familiar with what we're all about, so that you understand kind of the bigger value of the tool overall before just kind of one of our best features, which Sean said is certainly the stencils application. So super excited about that, but I want to give you a little context into what we're all about first as well. So if you're interested in, Asset Map as a solution, you'll understand what problems we solve and where we kind of sit in the market. So what is Asset Map? So we've been around for a little over a decade. And, really, I kind of consider us to be a cross between conversational financial planning and advice engagement, really kind of keeping those conversations going in your meetings, getting to know your client and doing great KYC with them to make sure that everybody is on the same page and your clients are engaged and making great decisions because they know that you're, there for their best interest. And that's really what I think we do better than any other tool out there, specifically focusing in around visualization and planning using visuals, because we all know that people are visual creatures. So it's really important to be able to level set using those visuals that we really, really focus in on. So what are some of the problems that we tend to hear that financial professionals are facing? And, I talk to people all the time. I'm so lucky to talk to many financial professionals throughout the week or at conferences, on Zoom calls. And a lot of the problems remain the same, depending on, whether they're insurance advisors or wealth managers. There are things like time to credibility. It just takes me so long to even get to know my client or find out what's important to them before we end up digging into what actually needs to be done. They really want to get to a place of trust super early in the relationship so that it can be bringing value to both parties right off the bat. And sometimes it takes a long time to get to that place of trust with your clients using maybe some traditional tools out there. Another problem that we hear so frequently is the complexity of deliverables. And I would say out of the three, this is the one I hear the most. So clients aren't interested in complex charts and graphs, 80-page reports, things that just tend to go right over their head. And that's whether it's a client who's just getting started in their careers or really, really, established folks that are, ready for retirement. If something's complex, people shut down. And, a lot of times that, complexity can be saved for behind the scenes in the back office. And those reports just don't resonate with clients. And also being able to scale advice to your whole book of business. So how often we hear, I really feel like I give great service to, my top 20, 30, 40% of my clients. But I feel like I'm leaving some of them without maybe, as much advice as maybe they deserve because I just don't have time or the manpower to do it. We really feel like Asset Map is allowing you to scale by being a little bit quicker, getting to that place of credibility faster, cutting down on the complexity of deliverables, and really simplifying that planning process. Get to a place of good advice in 15 minutes instead of 5 hours. And in that case, you're able to work with more of your clients that you've met throughout the years. So where are we finding that Asset Map is making the biggest impact? And I definitely agree with these three different timeframes. And we also really notice and realize that when an advisor is making the biggest impact is during the engagement with the client, whether that be during initial fact finding, when you're getting to know each other, doing that great KYC, being able to pop up a visualization and say, does this really match up with what your financial picture looks like for your family? It's really, really great to be able to reference something tangible like the visualization of an Asset Map report when you're doing that initial fact finding, rather than asking for a shoebox of statements, which just isn't really, a feasible or an enjoyable process. How about during recommendations and advice? So certainly you hope your clients are following along with what you're saying is important when you're making recommendations or providing advice to them. Again, leaning in on those visualizations can really, really give you a lot of value during times of recommendation and advice. And maybe my favorite part, ongoing engagement, semi-annual reviews, annual reviews, whenever your kind of cadences with your clients, pop it up and say, does this still look right? And that'll get your client thinking. They'll say, well, Sean might say, well, my wife is still a nurse, but she's been promoted since we last spoke. And maybe he just notices that by looking at that Asset Map report that we're going to see in a minute and notices right off the bat that that salary is just a little bit off. Some of the kind of interesting statistics and information we've gathered, by talking to some of our largest clients and some of our long-term clients are, people are really saving a lot of time using asset maps. So again, simplifying the complex is allowing you to be able to serve more of their clients, and they're saving huge amounts of time throughout the year, allowing them to get clarity to their clients for faster decisions, and again, working with more folks. We talked a little bit about this in the beginning. So getting to a place of trust quickly is so, so nice. And with trust comes clarity, right? So if you're building that relationship early on, you have a great rapport going, your client is going to really stick with you and follow along with the advice that you're providing. And that's going to, again, allow you to get to that great relationship earlier on in the process. And finally, growth, right? We'd all like to grow our practices and our businesses. And we're seeing statistics that are telling us that advisors are actually experiencing 43% higher annual revenue when they're using Asset Map. And that's through one of our enterprise clients that we've figured this out. And that's because, again, they're able to get to a place of recommendation faster. They're able to work with more folks and allowing them to prospect and, again, do what is kind of bringing them the most value, which is working with their clients and helping them get great results. So how the heck do we get the information in the system, and what does it look like if it's new to you? There's really 3 different ways to get information and get started in Asset Map. And whenever I talk to Sean or any of our onboarding specialists, we pop onto this page and I realize, hey, I can get some information typed in that I know about them right off the bat. I can send them a direct-to-client fact finder, which I absolutely love. Find out more about them from their perspective before they even come in a meeting. And that's called our discovery process. And finally, of course, integrations, right? Everyone loves to be able to take data that they have living somewhere else and not rekey it in to a system like Asset Map or anywhere else. Be able to utilize those updated values and the information that already lives somewhere else to give you that leg up and get started. So just a couple pieces of information about those 3 different aspects of getting data into Asset Map. If any of you were to click with your phone right on that QR code on the left-hand side, you would actually see the experience that your client would go through. And on the right-hand side, it'll say, welcome, Stephen and Kate. It's very, very user-friendly. I don't think I've had anybody ever tell me that a client wasn't able to follow along with what we're asking them. And it's almost like a TurboTax-like experience. We're going to say, tell me a little bit more about your family. Tell me a little bit more about your children, your business interests, your properties. And that's going to pre-build an asset map for you before you even have to do any work as the advisor. And it's all coming from the client's perspective, which is giving you insight into what's important to them, which again, we absolutely love. So moving right along, of course, like I said, integrations as well. We work with some of the great names out there in the industry, fellow vendors that we love to do joint events with and do co-promotion with, because we really feel like a lot of these solutions are a great matchup with Asset Map. So we're able to import a lot of information at some of these locations that you see here to, again, get your asset map beefed up maybe after you've done that client interview, and also take advantage of some great context from those platforms and updated values in many cases, which of course we love. As you can see here, we've got a great list and even some exciting coming soons that you certainly should pay attention to in the coming weeks. So very excited about that. And as much as we don't like to do manual data entry, I've been working with advisors for 15 plus years and nobody likes to do data entry. We keep it as simple and as easy as possible. There is not one thing about the Asset Map data entry that freaks me out or gets me scared as far as time constraints go. We ask for just the most important fields about these items for your client in order for you to have a great conversation and do some really wonderful conversational planning with them as well as the relationship grows. So here's what you get when you get that information entered in. You're going to get a really wonderful asset map report. Certainly one of the features we are known for the best is this visualization. And it's just so important to call out that we like to have the entire family, the entire household, anything that matters to that client or prospect listed on the asset map that matters to them financially. And that's business interests, trusts, maybe grandma who depends on you financially. Whatever that situation is, we want everyone who matters to that client listed out on the asset map so you can have the valuable conversation about whatever scenario is important to them. Because guess what? Carol's family looks nothing like my family and looks nothing like Sean's family. We're all a little bit different, and we want to make sure it resonates with that client because, again, That's going to build the trust that we were talking about earlier. So I think this is definitely one of what we're known for the most, right? Is the holistic household visualization. Again, here I have the business interest shown. So I can pop right from looking at client and spouse into talking about S&B printers and maybe what the future of that business looks like and what they're planning on doing. Very, very important for the conversations that we keep talking about. I'm going to go real quick on stencils because that's really what this whole webinar is about in just a few minutes. But that's really what we're going to be focusing in on that we've customized for Carroll and her content. So I'm going to hold off on that for Sean to really tell you what that's about. A couple other things that I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about. Once we get all of that information in the asset map report, whether it be from integrations or client discovery, the system's actually even going to go out and look for opportunities for you to talk to your clients about certain topics. Things like, well, you look like you might be at a bit of a gap for long-term disability or legal liability, but it looks like things are okay on longevity and liquidity. Red, yellow, green, just like a stoplight, it's going to give you the opportunity to talk to your clients about where there might be gaps and where it might actually set their finances sideways if something were to happen. All of that hard work toward retirement might be a thing of the past if they have an issue that comes up that was unexpected. So we really want to make sure that we're having those important conversations with our clients. And that's, again, something Carroll will be talking about in a few minutes as well. You could look at it per household or even at your whole book of business that you have an asset map. Maybe you're just spot checking this once a month and saying, wow, I really need to call the Smiths. I've been meaning to talk to them about long-term care coverage. Whatever is popping up in your stencils, or I'm sorry, your signals, is just a really great way through an algorithm we built here at Asset Map to see if there's conversations you should be having. A couple other things before I pass it off to Sean. Again, we do financial planning. So our target maps are really phenomenal to do quick planning, spot-based planning, whatever you want to call it, that isn't maybe so complex that, it's going to take, a bunch of different, calculations to get to where you need to go. But that being said, in just a few minutes, you can take all that great data that we know about the client and let them know if they're on track for things like retirement, loss of life calculations. What if something were to happen to Judy, or how have your, retirement savings accumulated over the years? We have cash flow to support it. It's a really, really wonderful planning engine that I'm still learning about all the time, and its value to really affect all of your clients, not just the ones that have complex scenarios. You can really utilize this across your full book of business, and it's just a super valuable piece of asset map that is extremely highly adopted. So you can see here, we take an approach of what you want, what you have, and what it means. And you can toggle off and on, what is really valuable for you to consider, or maybe you want to look at something without Social Security and then with Social Security included. We make it really, really easy to do that, either behind the scenes or with your clients in a meeting. And I'm a big proponent of the target maps here in Asset Map. And again, here's just some cash flow to kind of show that spend down as well. So great, great feature. And finally, as far as features go, really, really cool thing we had come out just a couple of months ago. What if I want to look at my asset map in kind of draft form? Or what if I'm making a recommendation to a client, but it's not really official yet, and I want to talk to them about it first and give them an idea of what I'm suggesting to them. Maybe it's, taking a frozen IRA or frozen 401k and rolling it into a Roth, or, anything you can think of that might be a suggestion that you're making to them. You can actually show that to them in a draft asset map before you make it official on their real map. And it's really a cool new feature that we've recently rolled out that we're very excited about. So I know that was fast, but we want to get to Sean and Carroll. But I needed to make sure that you all had some context into Asset Map before Sean jumped in and showed us off really what we're here to talk about today, which is our stencils. So Sean, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate it, Allison.
Of course.
I'm not going to take a ton of time. I want to leave some good amount of time for Carroll to kind of talk through just the benefits of these conversations, but want to kind of tee up those conversations and how we can have those conversations via the asset map. I'm not going to go through the different ways you can get clients into the application. Feel free to reach out to us to have those conversations. Allison pointed that out. You can manually add them. We can use discovery for new clients. We can use integrations for our existing book of business. But for our conversation today, we're going to start via a completed asset map. So just to kind of reorient everyone in case there's individuals on the call who have not seen asset map at all, what is this that we're looking in front of us? This is the asset map visual. And if we look at the visual in front of us, we're just working with one individual. They've got some income. They've got a 401k account. I know the value of their home. Looks like they got a mortgage here. And we've got a checking account. So asset map is a snapshot in time. I'm showing them their current financial situation. And Allison brought up one of the biggest benefits of asset map, and one of the biggest benefits we've seen across our advisor community is you can lead your meetings via this visual. I love financial technology until it's so difficult that you can't lead with it and you have to summarize the output. And what do I do with all of this? And how do I communicate it to the client? And that's the benefit of this visual is if this doesn't make sense, the details associated with it probably aren't going to make a ton of sense either. And this is where Carroll's content comes into play, and what we've built with that community is where stencils come into play. Now, stencil can be a confusing term, like what is a stencil? A stencil is a financial template that we use to overlay on top of a client's financial picture. So if you think about utilizing this for new clients, if you think about utilizing this for your existing book of business, if we look at the visual in front of us that we're going to work through today, I know this individual's income. I've got a decent idea about their investment accounts. But what about all the other areas that we're missing? What about the insurance side of things, or the investment accounts, or the debt structure? All of these additional beneficial conversations, where do I start? Like, how do I begin those conversations? And that's the powerful part of stencils. And it's the powerful piece of the stencil that we built, and how you don't have to say, Mr. Jones, like, what does the insurance landscape look like? And what are all these different areas that we should address? We're going to be able to proactively frame those conversations via the asset map. And we're going to be able to do it in a very quick and digestible manner, something that you can scale across your process. So Stencil, financial template that we're going to overlay on top of what we already know about the client's financial situation, or we can start with it depending upon how you build the asset map. I like to keep things very simple from a technology standpoint. Within asset map, if you right click on the asset map, it's going to bring up this quick actions menu. It has everything that you need. We do not need to navigate away from the visual that's in front of us. So if you think about using this with a client, we want to keep this up in front of the client to make sure that we have those visual conversations. What I would recommend to do is apply a stencil prior to meeting with the client. So if this is the information I know about Mr. Jones, but I want to go into that meeting with a lot of value, a lot of additional talking points, this is where the caring conversation stencil comes into play, because I don't want to leave it up to the client during that meeting to say, you know, what about all these additional accounts and what are you missing? It's all out of sight, out of mind. Clients don't know how to have those conversations. I don't know how to have those conversations in terms of my own financial landscape. And this is the benefit that you get to bring in utilizing this stencil. So how do we apply it? You want to right click on the asset map, and you're going to see this section for stencils right here. And if you go into the option for apply stencil, you're going to see a couple different options. Now we're going to focus on the caring conversation stencil for our conversation today. There's a lot of stencils that are available within Asset Map. You can also build your own custom stencils. So, you know your clients better than we do, the communities that you tend to work with. I would recommend to start with the stencil that I'm going to showcase today, because we spent a lot of time building it out. It's got a phenomenal amount of placeholders and talking points that you can utilize. It's going to save you time as the advisor, as opposed to having to build your own, which is what we're going to showcase. And if you go into the public library, you'll be able to see the rest of the stencils that are available. I'm going to click into public library right here. And the easiest way to get to this stencil is just start typing in caring. It'll bring up that caring conversation stencil. You can preview this stencil prior to applying it. It'll let you know everything that's associated with the stencil. I'm going to apply this stencil to one individual. If you had multiple individuals on the asset map, there'd be additional components associated with the stencil of how we've built that out. Feel free to reach out to our team. We'd be more than willing to have those conversations. But I'm going to go ahead and select this stencil, and I'm going to click on the option for apply. And rather than leaving it up to the client, what you're going to see is proactively, we're going to create all these additional talking points. And instead of going into that meeting and saying, Mr. Jones, what are we missing associated with your financial landscape? Or what are the additional important pieces, especially on the insurance side of things, where we might be listing a lot? And how do we tee up those conversations in a digestible manner that we can lead with? That's where the stencil comes into play. And so just if I zoom into one of these sections, you'll see all these additional talking points. We worked with Carroll in order to build a lot of these out in terms of these important talking points that are ultimately a part of most clients' financial situations. Maybe they're missed. Maybe we need to talk about the details associated with this, but this gives you permission to talk about the rest of the client's financial situation. Rather than just starting with a blank page, we get to tee up all of these additional talking points. And so after you apply the stencil, just from a technology standpoint, you can always get rid of items that don't apply. You can add values to the items that do apply. And most importantly, we can keep the items that we don't have a plan for now, but we know we're going to need to address in the future. And I think that's what, Carol's going to lean into during her section of the importance of having these conversations, right? They're complex conversations, and us as the advisor can bring the knowledge, but how do we even tee up the conversation? That's the benefit of the stencils. We can start here. The details are the details, but if I don't see it, it's going to be hard to even begin that financial conversation to start with, and stencils allow us to do that. Now, if we look at the stencil that we just applied, maybe for Mr. Jones, we got rid of the student debt forever ago. I had the conversation, I paid it off, early on within our relationship. That happened within my marriage. My wife eliminated debt immediately. So if I click on student debt right here, if I click on this trash can icon, I can easily delete it off of the asset map. The important piece is we had the conversation, right? I know it's not a part of your financial picture. It was a part of that meeting. We can then get rid of it. Maybe for one of these additional tiles as well, this individual does have a Roth IRA account. They didn't have the details via discovery. I didn't have my statement. I can very easily click on this tile. It's going to bring up a box in the center of the screen. Maybe this account is at XYZ, just to not make it specific, and we got $100,000 in there. If I click update, it's going to save it onto the asset map. It's going to highlight based upon the type of account that it is, and we'll be able to see it via the legend down below. So meant to be digestible, meant to allow you to lead the conversation, and we don't need to navigate away from this visual. Individuals are visual learners, visual conversations in terms of how do we even have those. The stencil is going to allow us to do that. And then in addition to that, I can leave some of these placeholders in order to drive the conversation moving forward. So if I'm meeting with this individual again, next month, in the next 2 months, I'm going to lead via this visual right here to make sure that we have an idea of some of the items that have changed, some of the items that we might need to add to this. It allows us to continually come back to this time and time again as we lead our conversations. So hopefully you see the power in this stencil, how easy it is to apply, the content associated to it, and the ability for you as the advisor to not necessarily need to know everything right out of the gate, but these are all the different components that we should be talking to. Where do we start? How do we start those conversations and then allow us to dive a bit deeper as we move forward? So just wanted to show a couple other things from a technology standpoint. That's the Caring Conversation stencil. Everyone has access to it. Again, just to reiterate this, if you go into stencils, click on Apply Stencil, hop into the public library, just type in Caring within this section right here. And again, if you want to preview that stencil, you can see all the different components that we built into that Caring Conversation stencil, all those placeholders that'll show up once we apply it to that individual. And if you want to see some of the other stencils that are available, if you click on this drop down, you'll see some other ones that are a part of our advisor community, more community specific stencils. Feel free to reach out to us if you've got any additional conversation or questions on the stencil. We'd be more than willing to accommodate for those. In application as well, if you ever have a question, or Sean, I saw this on a webinar, but you went through it quickly. How do I do that again? If you click on this chat bubble in the upper right-hand corner, this is where you can talk to my team within the application, but you can just search the keyword stencil within this location. We've got videos associated with how to do this in the application, some additional text and screenshots of what it's going to look like in application as you apply it. We've spent a lot of time building out this content into the support center. It's there for your benefit. So really excited about this. We've seen a lot of success across our advisor base utilizing stencils in general. This is just taking it a step further in terms of these additional conversations that we built into this stencil that are really important to have, and important to have with all of your clients across the board. We can utilize this to start. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to lean over to Carroll to kind of talk through some of her additional add-ins on this, and then we'll tie it in towards the end there. But excited for y'all to see this, and feel free to reach out to me directly if you've got questions on this or how do I do it. I love having these conversations, so I'm here.
So as Carroll gets teed up and starts sharing, Sean, if you want to stop sharing,
Yeah.
Carroll, you can get your few slides up. And I do want to remind everyone, please ask questions. So we have a good group here. We're covering a lot of information. So certainly we don't be shy. We love questions here at AssetMap, and certainly Carroll as well. So get your questions in for us. So when Carroll's finishing up, we'll make sure that we answer anything that you're curious about. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Carroll.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I need this. I mean, even on a personal level, what strikes me most is I thought I would start off with the problem. Obviously, AssetMap is the solution, but I wanted to just quickly go through how this is a growing problem and why AssetMap came and said, you know, we really do need a stencil or a blueprint for this one as well. Now, I coined this phrase, the shadow caregiving system, and as you can see, it's substantial. With 95% of the care, informal care, well, who's doing that? We are, frankly, it's us. And considering that a lot of people confuse Medicare and Medicaid, and there is something on this stencil, as you know, for Medicare. So after Medicaid, it's personal income that's actually funding this shadow caregiving system and economy. So, you know, if you think about when we were back at COVID and we saw all those nightmare incidences, the fact is there hasn't been a growing population of staffers. As a caregiver, there's no training for you. So you find yourself totally unprepared for the cost, for the physical. You know, most men, for example, they hire someone. Women are a little more hands-on. And there are many, many more men now involved in this caregiving role, which is surprising. It used to be way more women, but now it's the men. So when you think about the costs, there are lots of great sites, by the way, that you can go to actually see the cost. So on the stencil, when you're trying to figure out how this is going to impact the whole picture, because remember, these go into the whole picture that you get so quickly using this asset map, you can actually say to the client, is this where you expect to retire? If they say no, you can still go as small as a county to find out what kind of costs they're going to be. And that's one of the categories that you can now fill in there. And then you're going to see if it pops up on one of those little red buttons or the yellow button saying, this could be a problem. Now, the other thing that I thought we should realize is the reality is for the boomers, when they did their planning, I don't think there was an asset map. And so they never really saw the whole picture like you do with this tool. And as a result, well, frankly, accumulation was the buzzword. But what wasn't the buzzword? Longevity. Longevity was nowhere in the lexic of talking about this kind of planning. And of course, even the life insurance went to the low 90s, and now where they go all the way to 100. So the whole idea of planning for extended care was not really in the lexic. What's the result? A lot of them are unprepared. And what's that going to lead to? Well, dependency on a child. So when you look at this asset map and you're dealing with a client, this gives you the opportunity when it talks about long-term care, you can say, is this something you're concerned? Ask them if they're involved in it. Everyone has a story about long-term care. This visual gives you the opportunity to say, could this impact what we're doing here? Not your long-term care, not your short-term care, but maybe your parents. And of course, they'll lance into some sort of a story about that. Well, there is another area that we need to talk about, because we know that we saw that Medicaid is the #1 payer for extended care in the bumpy road that comes along with caregiving. And because they're the #1 payer, am I going to shock you when I tell you that the states are screaming, it's blowing up our budget? As a state, we can't handle this. So we have more than 20 states, more than 20, that are looking at, okay, what can we do as these boomers age into this stencil, into this age group? Well, one of the things, for example, I don't know how current you are, but the state of Washington is garnishing salaries. Minnesota is going the education route, trying to get the long-term services and supports, which is the government way of saying long-term care. They're trying to get all the different pieces somehow coordinated, because at the moment, it's a jumble. So if you're doing caregiving with someone and you think that it's going to progress kind of steady, it just doesn't. And as a result, if you're, paying DoorDash to deliver food or some other service to deliver meals, someone may say, well, why aren't you doing Meals on Wheels? That's a service that maybe your county will provide. Well, maybe, but if you need something special, will they be the ones who you have to consult with? Long story short, it's really never an easy way to go. Even the federal government, traditionally, I have a list, and I'm sure some of you who are in long-term care remember the Class Act, etc. But nothing has happened on the federal level. And so we have the states who are really looking at, this is a real problem. Well, if it's a problem for them, it's naive to think that it's not a problem for you, for us, for everyone, to be quite honest. What's the bottom line here? Okay, so there's 38 million caregivers providing 36 billion, hello, that's with a B, hours to parents, spouses, brothers, sisters. Sometimes it's a friend. You're not going to say, no, I won't help you out with that. One of the things that I wrote about was that if you ask somebody what they do, they will tell you what their current job is, but they never respond with, I'm a caregiver. Never. In all my day, I've never heard them say that. So it's kind of a side job that can really interfere with a career path for someone. So the bottom line is 600 billion in unpaid care. Now, if you look at the stencil and you say to yourself, this is a really hard topic to discuss. Well, here's your easy way. As a fiduciary, or even as just a good agent, your responsibility is the client's best interest is to make sure that something that could blow everything up in terms of family. Now, I'll take a second to tell you that one of the stories that I wrote about was when my mother-in-law, I married it was a second marriage. She had a wonderful trust. Her husband was a physician. He passed from Alzheimer's, a very substantial trust. So when she needed care, my husband and I found a place that she chose. Well, his brother was not as successful as my husband, and he didn't want the money to not wind up as some sort of inheritance. Let me just put it this way. To this day, they do not speak to one another. Now, obviously, this was something, had they seen that this was a potential as a blow up, even in her planning, they would have had a much, much more smooth go of it. Now, I would venture to tell you that in conjunction with this asset map, you could use any of these 3 steps. And the reason that I wrote up 3 steps is because it really, even once you see it on the stencil, how exactly are you going to proceed so that you can continue to really understand how is this going to fit into this plan that I am drawing up, whether it's their parent, whether it's, say, a sister or a brother who doesn't or is in denial or whatever. So the care guide I designed because it allows them to say, how exactly do you want to stay in control? Okay, Sean, you're in control. Let's say you say, that's right, Carol, and I'm really not going to discuss this with you. You're a great sister, but stay out of it. You need some ways that you can say, okay, but the point is, I want you to stay in control. I don't want to be making decisions for you. So what we'll have to do is once we have the stencil, we're going to have to say, what else do we need to know here? Where are we close enough together, for example, to be part of what everyone likes is this care squad. It's a simple chart where you say, okay, if something happens, Sean, am I the first person who's able to help? Well, Sean says, no, Carol, you live in California and I'm here in PA. So that isn't going to work. So I say, well, who is going to be there? And they're going to have to let me know. What can I do not to wind up with families who aren't speaking? Well, because I live in California, you can say, you could do the billing remotely. It's a matter of inclusion. So another thing I would point out is, when there's a crisis or any kind of a sudden need, people who have a role act. People who don't have a role act out. They do. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know how to help, etc. So one of the things the Care Squad does is they calm everybody down. If you have something to do, then you'll do that instead of getting crazy. And then for the care planning team, and here again, the stencil is a great tool because you want to pull other family members together and say, this is my plan. What's yours? And then they can look at something and you say, this was relatively simple. And you can have yours and I can have mine, even though we're sisters and brothers, and Sean may not want to share his with me. I may not want to share mine with him. But I want to know that I'm not flying into California because he has done nothing. And now there is this need on the part of our parent or one of us, for example. So this is again, just another tool. And I would say that it is a result of my writing up what financial advisors have shared with me as their biggest challenges. So the gold book, let's say you're looking at the stencil and you see something and you go, okay, they have an HSA and an FSA is what I'm familiar with. What is this thing with the FSA versus? You can find it in the book. The gold book is a textbook. You suffer from insomnia? Go there. It'll put you right out. There's 92 references, footnotes, and what have you, and I think it's probably time for me to update it. But I did that. And then the financial advisors and agents and friends came and said, look, could you do a storybook where it's a multi-generational? Because we all know caregiving doesn't happen in a vacuum. It involves family and friends and all your stories. Just think through what you know. So the second one was really for the consumer, and it's an ebook, it's a print book. And of course, we're consumers. They're in their car. We're all at the sports facility watching the children train, or maybe after school. So that one is Audible. And then the third one there, the green one, was where consumers and advisors and agents came and said, I tried, Sean shut me down. So there's a bunch of stories in there, every single suggestion. What if you're from a family whose tradition is that this stays in the family? There are traditions in Indian families, Hispanic families, white families, purple families, where the expectation is, I will take care of Sean because that's my role. Well, that could be very difficult. And again, these are just tools that you can fill in as you go, and you use what I am very impressed with the overall asset map, and very flattered, frankly, that I was asked to create the extended care stencil, because I think that, and you know, this is a really growing area. When you have so many people caregiving and trying to work at the same time, and their careers are being derailed, you have states who are going, uh-oh, we can't handle this. We don't have staff. We don't have training. Well, neither do we. There are, of course, specialists. NAIFA has the Limited and Extended Care Planning Center, as well as we now have this wonderful relationship with Asset Map. And I'm going to turn it back over to Allison, who can talk to you about what we do to help you access all of this.
Thank you, Carol. That was wonderful. I even picked up on some really good ideas, because guess what? You know, not even those of us who are super close with their families or feel like they might have a game plan if something were to happen. You know, I just picked up on 3 or 4 tips that I never would have thought about. If, you know, even someone who kind of feels like they have it together in a situation like that, I never would have thought of, especially the one I want to call out, because if anyone missed it, I think it's extremely valuable, is having everyone's roles defined. I think that, because guess what? You have the best of intentions of jumping in, trying to help someone. Everyone wants to help, right? Even the most altruistic, helpful people. If you know exactly what you should be doing, as opposed to everyone just trying to figure it out in the moment, man, what a great suggestion to have a game plan of who would do what if something were to happen. Even if you have 3 or 4 people that would jump in to help, give everyone a role, because when you have a role, it means you're going to take it seriously. And I just think that is phenomenal advice. So that's the one thing that stuck out to me, among many other things. But you can see how Carol's great advice being kind of ported into Asset Map in the stencil to facilitate that conversation and take the guesswork out for you as the financial professional could just be extremely, extremely valuable. And we are honored to have you part of our stencil library. And we would also be missing an opportunity to thank Adam Holt, our CEO, who originally you would have had the conversation with Carroll, and you two really envisioned how valuable this could be, and that's no surprise as two wonderful industry visionaries. So thank you so much for connecting with Adam on that. And as you can see on the screen here, and please, we have a few more minutes. If you have any questions at all for myself, for Sean, for Carroll, get those questions in. We are not shy. We will answer your questions. We did have one, and then we'll talk about what we have up on the screen. And although the gentleman or gal who wrote in the question, as they were anonymous, they had asked, what if I add a stencil and I want to get rid of it? What if I added the wrong one? Or what if I want to change it up and I currently have the baby boomer stencil in there, but I want to now use the caring conversation stencil? How do I do that? So Sean, I don't know if you can quickly just pop up the app and we can address that quickly on how you could remove a stencil if you wanted to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually pretty easy to do. Within that same drop down right here, I applied a stencil. If I want to clear it, I can clear the stencil via that option. And then I can go back into the public library and I can reapply it. You can apply multiple stencils to the same household. I would probably recommend not to do that in most situations because it'll add a ton onto the asset map. So pick one, save the items that you want from it, and then you can use a different one. But you can clear via this option right here.
Thank you. That was very easy and certainly makes sense as to why that person was able to figure it out on the fly. So very good. We try to make things pretty easy there in Asset Map. So we do have another question or comment and question come in from Chuck. Carroll, I'm going to read this off to you and you can add your comments. So Carroll, you mentioned that Medicaid as the #1 payer of extended care benefits, many states have initiated cost recovery procedures to begin after the death of a Medicaid beneficiary domicile in that state. In many cases, this is the largest exempt asset that Medicaid beneficiaries may have had. There are some exceptions to the cost recovery action, but some non-spouse family members thinking the home will be the estate after death of the Medicaid beneficiary would be shocked to find out that that's not the case. Your stencil might open the door to overall extended care subjects that are important to talk about.
Very, very good remark and very true. I think it harkens back to the fact that states are getting to the point where it's blowing up their state budget. And I completely agree with you, Chuck. And I do think that that's one of the reasons the more people that can use Asset Map, it really opens the door to that kind of, well, maybe the home won't be there. And, so many people really think that that's a big deal. And it is. So thank you, Chuck. Good point.
Very, very well thought out comment. Sean, if you want to pop back up the NAIFA landing page. So certainly we all absolutely have and I'm going to keep checking the questions. Oh, we have another one. Randall, if a Roth conversion is recommended, does the tax consequence of that get incorporated? Sean, that's probably the best question for you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Think of Asset Map is kind of what's occurring right now. So the tax consequence associated with a conversion would not necessarily show on the Asset Map, but you could add it into the notes. It would be a bit manual. I could click into here and I could go into the notes section and I could add in those details. I could title this is tax, X, Y, and Z, and then I could include that in the report output. So short answer is no, it doesn't like import or do any of those calculations for you, but you can detail some of that context out on the Asset Map.
And where it would get into a little more detail on taxes and implications like that would be in the target maps. Is that right, Sean?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Target maps are where Asset Map, we kind of view everything as right now. Taxes apply once we get into target maps.
When you're actually doing that planning work. Yep.
Right.
Perfect. That is great. Great questions from the audience. So now I'll ask you to pop up the page and I'll keep monitoring the questions, but we do, so I guess a little history lesson now. So I guess about 2 years ago, we started working with the folks over at NAIFA to get to some of their conferences and meet some of their wonderful members. I've been to a couple NAIFA events now, And I had the pleasure of speaking at one with my good friend Jamie Hopkins, who has been part of the NAIFA community, and really had some really great experiences at a couple of NAIFA events. And I have to say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm chatting with you all, they're really dedicated members who are very involved with the association and the organization, and really love to learn from each other and network when they're in person. It was a very good vibe at those conferences, and it was really nice to be around like-minded professionals who really felt like they're getting a ton out of that relationship. So I very much am a proponent for NAIFA. They're amazing folks back in the back office, and also the advisors that and agents that work alongside them. So it's a great organization. But that being said, we were honored to add NAIFA to our discount community. So, you know, you do as NAIFA members, or if you're interested in NAIFA, you know, certainly you can find out more from their community as well. But we do offer a 10% discount to AssetMap through NAIFA. So not only would you, of course, be able to take advantage of that stencil, but you would also be able to get a bit of a price break to AssetMap as well. And it's really easy to get to. It's just asset-map.com /NAIFA, and you can sign up for a demo there. You can connect with our customer support team where Sean works there. You can sign up right now for AssetMap there if you want to. And we'll also be adding this great webinar that we've done today to the landing page, so that, again, if you want to rewatch it, you could find that on NAIFA internal pages as well as here on the AssetMap NAIFA landing page. So I'll type the URL in the chat just in case you want to go check it out and you don't feel like typing it. That would be just fine. But we are, as Sean mentioned earlier, always happy to connect with you on more questions, certainly connect with our sales team, and so on and so forth. I did see another question come in, so I will answer that along with putting this in the chat. I am multitasking. So let's do
Well, while you're doing that for a second, let me just say that we very much would like you as a member of NAIFA, because we are a community. This is the sort of thing that NAIFA members do. I am a NAIFA member. I'm part of that Floridian chapter down here cooking, right? But I am also a member because I'm not an expert in everything. So when I need advice on, say, one of the things in the asset map that a client tells me about, like a Medicaid compliant annuity. What exactly is that, and where do I find it? I would go to NAIFA, specifically to the center. So we are a community, and we're always looking for people who are dedicated to improving any kind of, you know, interaction with one another for the benefit of our clients. It's belong/NAIFA.org. And you can go right there in case you're not already a NAIFA member. And then you can get your discount as well.
Two birds, one stone. I love that. Randy had a question about compliance. We are approved at many broker dealers and RIAs in the kind of financial services community. I tend to be the kind of first line of defense at AssetMap to help out with compliance approvals. I find it to be fun. I love working with compliance departments. And your company might already be on the list. And if they're not, we are always happy to talk to the appropriate folks at back offices to make sure that they're comfortable with the use of AssetMap. Randy threw in there Osaic. So we definitely have a light relationship with Osaic. We actually it's funny you should say, we just entered into a formal approval process with them. Their team has been fantastic to work with. So it's kind of it's a word of mouth approval for now. No one's ever been told not to use it at AssetMap, but we're really, at Osaic with AssetMap. But we're formalizing that process with them, Randy. So you should be just fine in the meantime. But they've really taken a step to make it a little more formal with us, which is always fantastic. And they've been wonderful to work with from the start. So you should be just okay. No problems with Osaic at this point. But if you have any other questions, I did put my name and email in the chat. If you have compliance specific questions or broker dealer specific questions, I'm always happy to help. My goodness, guys, did we time this any better? We are right at 3 p.m. Carroll, I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to help us build the stencil. And I want to thank Sean for really putting it into action. And this has just been phenomenal. And I want to thank you both for being here today.
Same back
Appreciate
at
it.
you. Thank you.
Agreed, Allison.
And thank you to the audience for being here. Please reach out if you have any questions, either on our website at NAIFA.org or certainly with my email address. We are all happy to help and chat with you post the webinar. So thanks for being with us today. Bye, everyone.
Bye.